Professor Filius Flitwick was a part-goblin, part-wizard who attended Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, possibly sometime in the late 1920s. Being an intelligent individual, Flitwick applied himself and became a model student. Sometime after his graduation, he returned to Hogwarts and became the Charms Master. This is the life of Filius Flitwick. Filius Flitwick was born into a wizarding family with the distant descent of a goblin, which is why the term part-goblin instead of half-goblin is used. He studied magic at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, presumably after purchasing his first wand from Ollivanders, and was sorted into Ravenclaw House. During his sorting, the sorting hat wavered between putting him in Ravenclaw or Gryffindor. The sorting hat ultimately chose the former though, as the decision took less than 5 minutes, thus proving that Flitwick was not a true hat stall, though it could still be debated, judging by the length of time. In his later life, he learned that this was the circumstance that occurred to Minerva McGonagall as well, a good friend of his, to which the two professors found amusing. This was because, had the sorting hat chosen Gryffindor for Filius and Ravenclaw for Minerva, they may have exchanged positions as heads of house. At some point, he asked the Grey Lady about the whereabouts of Rowena Ravenclaw's lost diadem, which was rumoured to grant the wearer great wisdom. However, she denied revealing the information, which she would later relay to a teenage Tom Riddle in the 1940s and Harry Potter in 1998, which means that, although his birth date is not specific, he attended Hogwarts before Tom Riddle. It was also mentioned that Flitwick, being a model student with nothing to hide, never entered or used the Room of Hidden Things in the Room of Requirement. It is likely that he achieved a high grade OWL and Newts in Charms, as later in his life he went on to teach this subject for over 30 years. He also may have taken exams in Defence Against the Dark Arts. After completing his Newt exams in his 7th year, Flitwick graduated from Hogwarts and then proceeded to become a master duelist and later earned the title of Dueling Champion at some point. It is also likely that Flitwick studied further into magic, becoming an accomplished wizard, masterful in spells, charms and defensive magic, and even possibly earning the title of Doctor and becoming a fully fledged and educated sorcerer before beginning his teaching career back at Hogwarts sometime in or before the early 1970s. Now back at his old school, Professor Flitwick took up the post of Charms Master. His classroom was Classroom 2E, which was located in the Charms corridor on the 3rd floor of the Training Grounds Tower. Professor Flitwick's teaching style was regarded as more laid back than some other teachers at Hogwarts, such as Minerva McGonagall's or Severus Snape's. He, unlike others, allowed his students to play games during the lessons before the Christmas holidays. But he was not a bad teacher either, as Fred Weasley commented that he couldn't see old Flitwick marking anyone down, and he usually gets everyone through their exams alright. He does not hand out many detentions or deduct points often, even for tardiness. Flitwick has a rich sense of humour and is always fair with his students, even those who are not in Ravenclaw. Due to his heritage, Flitwick does not discriminate against those of different backgrounds. He also encouraged students to experiment with their own magic and did not generally give detentions for slack work. Instead, he preferred to give students homework so they could catch up. The only punishment he did give was lines, such as when Seamus Finnegan accidentally knocked him off his stack of books by letting go of his wand in the air. Flitwick taught charms to Lily Evans, the former Orders, and also Severus Snape. In 1976, he administered the Theory of Defence Against the Dark Arts OWL. He walked between the hundreds of small desks in the Great Hall during the exam, and once their time was up, ordered the students to put down their quills, then used a summoning charm to collect in the papers. But he was knocked over onto the floor when the hundreds of scrolls of parchments zoomed into his outstretched arms. Flitwick would later go on to survive the First Wizarding War, in which his former students, Lily and James, were both killed. Despite these dark times, or perhaps because of them, Flitwick continued to teach at Hogwarts. Flitwick, now in his elderly years, was still teaching at the school during the 1991-92 school year, and just before the start of the school term began, Albus Dumbledore trusted him to contribute to the defences of the Philosopher's Stone chambers. Flitwick, being the Charms Master, enchanted a considerable amount of winged keys that fly through the air. At the start of his first lesson of the school year, he took the register and upon seeing Harry Potter's name there, squeaked excitedly and fell off his stack of books. Also, Flitwick was very impressed when Professor McGonagall, his longtime friend and fellow colleague, told him that she was giving a Nimbus 2000 after being chosen to play as the seeker for the Gryffindor Quidditch team. Professor Flitwick also attended the first Quidditch match of the season, Gryffindor versus Slytherin. He sat high up in the stands near Severus Snape and Quirinus Quirrell. He looked extremely shocked and worried when Harry seemingly lost control of his broom, as well as when Snape's cloak caught fire, but applauded merrily when Harry regained control and caught the snitch, winning the game. Professor Flitwick did not allow his first year class to actually perform any magic until Halloween, and after some coaching, he gave each of his pupils a feather which they were to levitate using the charm Wingardium Leviosa. The class had been anxious to try this since Flitwick used the charm on Neville Longbottom's toad, Trevor. Hermione Granger, who was paired with Ron Weasley, performed the spell perfectly, and Professor Flitwick happily announced her success to the class. On Christmas Eve, Professor Flitwick and Professor McGonagall were in charge of decorating the Great Hall. Flitwick used live fairies to decorate, which he was rather fond of doing. The hall was noted to look absolutely spectacular. He also attended the feast on Christmas Day and pulled a cracker with Professor Dumbledore. The headmaster exchanged his pointed wizard hat for a flowery bonnet, and Flitwick read a joke to him, which made him chuckle merrily. As the first year exams approached, Professor Flitwick set the first year's homework to learn various spells and charms off by heart. When it was finally time for the tests, Flitwick called his students in one by one to his classroom and asked them to make a pineapple tap dance across his desk. He presumably also set theoretical papers, which were to be completed in a sweltering hot classroom. Once the exams were over, Hermione Granger visited Flitwick in the staff room, saying that she was worried that she got a question wrong in the theory test. He, unable to help himself with excitement, told her in confidentiality that she had actually gotten 112%. He also attended the end-of-term feast, during which Gryffindor won the House Cup, breaking Slytherin's 7-year winning streak. Professor Flitwick continued to teach during the 92-93 school year, and during a charms class, Ron Weasley's wand flew out of his hand and hit Flitwick square in between his eyes, leaving a great green boil there, which he presumably vanished. He also set a piece of homework for his second years to do, which involved using the Standard Book of Spells Grade 2. One of the first lessons that Professor Flitwick taught during the first term was revising the levitation charm. He also taught the second years the Incendio spell. Later on in the year, Mrs. Norris, Argus Filch's cat, was found petrified on the first floor. Professor Flitwick was amongst the crowd of students and teachers who saw her there, hanging from one of the torches. Not long after, Colin Creevy, Justin Finch Fletchley and the Gryffindor house ghost, Nearly Headless Nick, were also petrified. Professor Flitwick and the rest of the staff arrived at the scene shortly after the discovery, and he, assisted by Professor Aurora Sinestra of the Astronomy Department, took Justin to Madame Pomfrey in the hospital wing for treatment. Near the end of the year, Professor Flitwick, along with the rest of the staff, were called to the staff room by Professor McGonagall. There, McGonagall told them that Slytherin's monster had kidnapped a student and taken them to the Chamber of Secrets. Flitwick immediately let out a squeal. McGonagall told them that the heir of Slytherin had left another message right under the first, which read, "Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever." Flitwick burst into tears at hearing the news. It had in fact been Ginny Weasley, one of his students, and when Lockhart entered the room, the whole staff turned against him, while all of the teachers reminded him of his comments of knowing what was in the chamber all along and so forth. Flitwick piped in saying that Lockhart had told him that he was quite sure he knew what exactly was inside it. The next day, Professor Flitwick was to send his Ravenclaws home on the Hogwarts Express. However, Harry Potter had slain the monster, sealed the chamber and saved Ginny, so Hogwarts therefore remained open. Instead, Flitwick attended the end-of-term feast and applauded happily when Rubeus Hagrid returned from Azkaban, being incorrectly sent there on suspicion of the chamber openings. Had the Chamber of Secrets not been opened during the year, Professor Flitwick would have had to administer the second-year exams. However, at the end-of-term feast, Professor Dumbledore cancelled all examinations as a special school treat. Prior to the beginning of the 1993-94 school year, Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban and the Mentors were placed outside Hogwarts for the students' safety, particularly Harry Potter's. Regardless, Professor Flitwick continued his tenure as Charms Master, along with the added responsibility as the conductor of the Hogwarts Choir. During the welcoming feast, Flitwick led a reciting of "Something Wicked This Way Comes," and near Christmas, Flitwick went to the Three Broomsticks Inn with McGonagall, Hagrid, Madame Rosmerta and Cornelius Fudge. Together, they discussed James and Lily Potter's deaths, as well as the escape of Sirius Black. It was said that the Potters used the Fidelis charm that was most likely cast by Dumbledore himself to protect their home in Godric's Hollow. Flitwick then explained and described the operation of the spell and the position of the Secret Keeper. Soon after, Professor McGonagall confiscated a firebolt broomstick that Harry Potter received as an anonymous Christmas present, and she handed it over to Professor Flitwick and Madame Rolanda Hooch, the flying instructor. The two examined it to see if there were any malicious or unfriendly spells cast upon it, since they thought it possible that Sirius Black had sent it to him in the hope of killing him. Later on in the year, Sirius Black successfully broke into the castle and infiltrated the boys' dormitory in Gryffindor Tower. As a defense mechanism, Professor Flitwick taught the oak front doors to recognize a picture of Black as to not grant him access. Also around this time, Flitwick set the third year exams, which involved casting the cheering charm. Nearer the end of the school year, Black was finally captured and locked inside Professor Flitwick's office on the 7th floor, near the base of the West Tower. However, Black vanished that night and escaped from the castle. Filius continued his career in 1994 at Hogwarts when the Triwizard tournament was being held. When the Beauxbatons Academy of Magic and Durmstrang Institute students arrived, he applauded them at their entrances, and after that, both he and Dumbledore led a presentation of Hoggy Worty Hogwarts by the whole school. During the Yule Ball, Professor Flitwick conducted the Hogwarts school choir in playing waltzes. The choir played several waltzes over the course of the evening, giving students a chance to slow dance with their partners. However, once the dances heated up and the Weird Sisters arrived to perform, Flitwick was passed over the heads of all the dancers, imitating what Muggles call a mosh pit, yelling at them to let him down. In the third task, Professor Flitwick, along with Minerva McGonagall, Rubeus Hagrid and Bartimaeus Crouch Jr., disguised as Alistair Moody, was appointed one of the marshals to patrol around the maze. He wore a shining star on his wizard hat and had to respond to any of the champions' cries for help. At the end of the task, Cedric Diggory was tragically murdered, and Lord Voldemort was declared to have risen to power once again, and thus the Second Wizarding War began. Flitwick attended the memorial feast to Cedric Diggory at the end of the year. The next year, Dolores Umbridge became the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. She quickly arose to become the High Inquisitor of Hogwarts, gaining the power to inspect the teaching standards of her fellow colleagues. During Umbridge's inspection of Professor Flitwick's Charms class, she sat in the corner of his classroom, making notes on her clipboard while he taught his Newt students. He treated her like a guest, and did not seem to be distracted by her at all, since she hardly spoke, though she did ask Alicia Spinnet what the classes were like. Satisfied with what she had heard and seen, Umbridge left Flitwick to continue his lesson. When Umbridge then inspected Professor Flitwick's class with the school choir, she seemed also impressed and pleased, but pulled out a tape measure and measured Flitwick's height. He did not seem happy at all and looked rather offended, and once Professor Umbridge had banned the Quibbler from the school after an interview of Harry Potter was printed, all the teachers were proud of him for standing up to her. Professor Flitwick, not allowed to talk about anything not relating to this subject, secretly gave a box of sugar mice to Harry during one of his classes, before saying "shh" and hurrying away. Later on in the year, Professor Umbridge became the new headmistress after Professor Dumbledore left the school. On her first day in the office, Fred and George Weasley released fireworks into Hogwarts Castle, and some sparklers managed to find themselves into classroom 2E, Flitwick's classroom. He, wanting to annoy Umbridge like the rest of the staff, ran for help. Once she had extinguished the fireworks, he revealed that he could have gotten rid of them himself, but he wasn't sure that he had the authority, before slamming the door in her face. After the Easter break, Fred and George used one of their inventions, a portable swamp, to change a corridor into a bog, and then departed from the school to go into the world of business. Professor Flitwick was seen cheering and supporting them at their departure after they ran rings around Umbridge and Argus Filch. Flitwick was asked to remove the swamp that they created at the end of the year, which he did, but he claimed to be unable to remove a small patch under the window. He actually left it there as a tribute to what he saw as a demonstration of rather advanced magical capabilities. In 1996, Hogwarts was put under the protection of a group of Aurors. Professor Flitwick, together with the caretaker Argus Filch, was appointed to check off every student entering the school at the entrance gates on a register and take their belongings to be searched for any dark artifacts or weapons. With every student now in the grounds, Flitwick cast a magical barrier spell, shield charm most likely, on the gates, preventing anyone from entering. One of the first classes he taught to his 6th year class was transforming vinegar into wine. He approached Harry, Ron and Hermione during the lesson and asked each of them to perform the spell. Hermione cast it perfectly the first time, while Harry turned his to ice and Ron blew his up. Flitwick gave the two boys homework based on their performance to practice for the next lesson. During one of the students' trips to Hogsmeade, Professor Flitwick also visited the village, possibly for security reasons. On his way back to the castle, Horace Slughorn, the current potions master, invited him to have a drink at the Three Broomsticks Inn, but Flitwick claimed to have an emergency choir practice and left him. It is not clear if this is true or not. He very well could have been leaving Hogsmeade because he knew Slughorn would want to reminisce at the Three Broomsticks. Later on in the year, Flitwick was in the Great Hall with the Hogwarts choir when Death Eaters invaded Hogwarts, and Minerva McGonagall ordered him to get Severus Snape. When inside Snape's office, Snape stunned him and told Hermione Granger and Luna Lovegood that he had collapsed and that they should tend to him until he regained consciousness. Shortly after knocking Flitwick out, Snape killed Professor Dumbledore. Once recovering from his attack by Snape, Flitwick insisted on looking after the Ravenclaws. He also took part in the conversation of whether or not Hogwarts should remain open or to be closed, as having the headmaster killed by one of the staff was a terrible stain on Hogwarts history. Flitwick insisted that the decision should be made by the school governors, to which Minerva McGonagall, the new headmistress, was inclined to agree with. He also argued that Dumbledore should be buried in the grounds, which had never happened to any headmaster or headmistress. Professor Flitwick, with the rest of the staff and students, later attended the funeral of Albus Dumbledore at the end of the year in the grounds near the Hogwarts Lake, and prior to the start of the 1997-98 school year, Severus Snape was made headmaster of Hogwarts, while his fellow Death Eaters, Electo and Amicus Carroll, became the Muggle Studies and Defence Against the Dark Arts teachers, respectively. Despite the school now in the grasp of Lord Voldemort, or perhaps because of it, Professor Flitwick returned to the castle to teach and protect the students. The Carrolls were put in charge of all discipline and punishments, although Flitwick and the staff never sent students to them if they could avoid it, as the new professor's idea of punishment involved such horrors as the Cruciatus Curse. Near the end of the 1997-98 school year, Electo ordered Professor Flitwick to let her into Ravenclaw Tower. He did so, answering the riddle required to enter. When she failed to come out, Amicus told McGonagall to make Flitwick open the door for him, but she did it herself. That night, Flitwick, with Professor Sprout and Slughorn, was awoken by Minerva McGonagall's cat Patronus, and, still in their night clothes, went to find out what she wanted. They then found McGonagall dueling Snape to the death, and after squeaking her name in shock, Flitwick told Snape he would not commit any more murders in this castle. He proceeded to cast a spell which animated the suit of armour that Snape was using to shield himself from McGonagall. Snape then ran into a classroom, chased by Flitwick, Sprout and McGonagall, and flew out of the window, escaping them. Aware that Lord Voldemort would soon attack the castle, Flitwick and the other professors set to defend the school and the students. He pointed his wand out the window and cast several intricate protective spells, including Protego Horribilis. Then, he was quizzed over the lost diadem of Ravenclaw by Harry Potter, whom he was shocked to see under the certain circumstances. He told Harry that the diadem was long since lost and that it wouldn't really help anyway, unaware that it was a Horcrux. After a brief discussion of how to fight the Death Eaters, it was agreed that Flitwick, McGonagall and Sprout would take the groups of overage fighters up to Ravenclaw Tower, Gryffindor Tower and the Astronomy Tower. Flitwick presumably took his group up to Ravenclaw Tower, since it was a good place to work spells and enchantments. Professor Flitwick was seen fighting Yaxley close to the front doors in the entrance hall, just before Voldemort ordered everyone to cease dueling and offered peace in return for Harry Potter. However, the battle soon resumed after Harry was thought to be murdered by Voldemort. In the Great Hall, Antonin Dolohov was seen falling to the ground with a scream at Flitwick's hands, defeated and possibly killed. Flitwick also witnessed the duel between Harry and Voldemort in the Great Hall, and after Voldemort's spell rebounded on him, Flitwick, Sprout and McGonagall all reached to hug Harry at the same time, while everyone else joined in. A celebration feast was later held, but no one sat in their proper places. Teachers, parents and students were all jumbled up. It is likely that Professor Flitwick sat by the Ravenclaws, since he was head of their house. He was seen talking with Horace Slughorn and Pomona Sprout after the battle. It is likely, that Professor Flitwick continued his long tenure as Charms Master after the war, though he may have retired sometime before 2017, being as old as he was. And that is all for today's video on the life of Filius Flitwick. Everyone, thank you very much for watching today's video. I do have a personal life, and if you want to follow my personal life on Instagram at InstaDeanJ, you can follow me, send me a message, ask me how I am. Don't leave just yet though, I have plenty of other videos for you to watch if you want to look on the left hand side of the screen. And on the right hand side of the screen, for all you Harry Potter fans that are also Game of Thrones fans, I have a second channel, Game of Thrones Lore. Check that out, and check out the videos. Guys, thanks very much again, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you at the next video.